everybody, to Buford Pusser, the other story. With me today is Chuck Puckett. He is a researcher that I've known for several years. Now, Chuck and I didn't always see eye to eye on these topics. I started out as a Pusser fan, and I ran into him when he was already converted over to a person looking for the truth. So, Chuck, how are you doing?
Doing good, Mike. It's a little cool down in southern Arkansas for April, but we're making it. Sun shining,
Well, there you go. All right, let's get this thing started here. In the last meeting or last video that I did, I addressed the fact that Pusser was telling people that he was going to be stalked and killed. And he started saying that about 4 weeks prior to the alleged ambush. Have you ever heard that same story?
Yeah, I've heard that. He was, like he was planning on something, something happening. And that way, if it did, he'd been telling people about it, what everybody think was odd,
Well, like I said in the last video, he even told one of his girlfriends, one of them that he was planning on having a long-term relationship with, that when she questioned about Pauline still being married and all this, and he's supposed to have told her that Pauline wouldn't be a problem much longer. Mm-hmm. Now, it seems kind of odd that he's going to be stalked and killed, and Pauline's not going to be a problem much longer, which, there's nothing definite there, but it kind of believes he's setting himself up a story for this sort of thing.
He was laying the groundwork, I would call it. He was. It had to be laying the groundwork for something. Yeah.
First, Carl gets a call.
Right.
And you talked to Rex Armistead about this. Now, Rex was an investigator with the Mississippi Highway Patrol.
Right, chief investigator.
And he was one of the two that the governor of Mississippi sent to assist Tennessee with their investigation.
Right.
What did he have to tell you about?
What Rex told me what Carl's story was Carl said that night he had got a call at the sheriff's office. There's some trouble at the state line. And just a few minutes after that call, Carl told them Buford came in and he was too drunk to answer the call. So Carl didn't say anything to Buford about the call. He just said, well, going home, Buford, everything's slow, so he went on home. So this is Carl's story. He said as soon as Buford left, he got on the phone and called Buford's house to talk to Pauline. And he told Pauline, said, Buford's coming home, said there's probably going to be a call there. Don't let him answer the phone. It's about some trouble at the state line. And said that he's too drunk to answer the call. We'll handle it. And said, do not let him get on the phone. Well, he said Buford got home, the phone rang, and Buford did get it. And he took off, and Pauline was scared to death that he was too drunk. She jumped in the car with him. And Carl, and now Rex said the TBI stayed on Carl for 2 weeks and Buford, and they would not change their story. That was story, at least Carl's story, and it sounded like he's protecting Buford.
Yeah, let's think about this for a minute. Mm-hmm. Now, Pauline wasn't even at home for a while.
Right.
She arrives, according to Levon Plunk, she arrives there at the house and goes in. So at what point did Carl call and talk to Pauline? Doesn't make sense.
Right. Yeah. Because Diane didn't say anything about a call, about her being there when the phone rang. And, she's going with Miss Plunk. And so she wasn't home.
So, it's one of those things where you have to look at it and say, well, is this a cover-up that Carl was already working for Buford, knowing what was about to happen, had already happened? I don't know exactly the timing there.
Right.
At any rate, so at 4:45, they get down to the state or the New Hope Road. And I might point out that, the story also about her wanting to be with Buford because first, like you're saying, he's intoxicated. Other stories are that she didn't want him to be down there by himself, that she was worried about his safety, so on and so forth. Now, none of that makes sense to me either, because she was leaving him.
Right. Yeah.
So
he's laying the groundwork, he laid it, so it's about to be.
And
Yeah.
obviously, all they had to do
Mhm.
was stick with that story.
Right, right. And Rex said he wouldn't change it.
The TBI and the Mississippi Highway Patrol couldn't
Yeah.
shake that story in any way, which they didn't.
Right, right. No,
All
no.
right. What did
And,
Rex tell you about other suspects?
far as suspects, when he named several, he said Kirksey Nix was definitely thought to be the main one. He also mentioned a man named Chuck Christian, Gary McGann. Now there's supposed to be 3 or 4 of them in the car, supposedly. Then of course, he mentioned J.H. Sharon's sons. Now they were out of Tallulah, Louisiana, and they were hooked up with Carlos Marcello. That was either his nephew's company or something, and they had a truck going through McNairy County with a load of liquor, I think going to Chicago or somewhere up that way. And then Pusser pulled them over and confiscated the load, and they had to pay him to get it back. And he was told, don't do it again. And he did do it again. And they think, that was a rumor too.
Now,
then another rumor was, of course,
Carlos Marcello was not somebody you wanted to mess around with.
That's right. Yeah.
Because later he was connected to the Kennedy assassination.
Oh yeah, I mean, you didn't want to cross him. That was stupid to even do that. And then you had there's another rumor that he had pulled over one of DeWitt Dawson's trucks, and DeWitt went and paid him for the load to get it back, and they got into it over that. There were some suspects as well. And I'm trying to think there was McDonald, I think Albert McDonald, wasn't that his name? And
yeah.
2 Jump Sparks, he was, I think, mentioned, and Gary McDaniel. McDaniel wound up dead about 3 years after that.
Yeah.
Gary McDaniel found him in Sabine River, and Louisiana Texas border down there, and there's a bunch of names, and of course,
his name was thrown into the mix.
Who now?
Towhead White. He was.
Oh, sure. Yeah. Right. Yeah. He got blamed for masterminding it.
Well, that depends on who you talk to, because some people think that W.O. Hathcock was the mastermind.
Right. I've heard that too. Yeah. I think Pusser tried to push that.
Well, okay, let's get to this. The Cadillac.
Right.
What did Rex have to say about a Cadillac?
Rex said the rumor on that was that Cadillac was stolen off a car lot in Tupelo. And Nix's payment for doing this was he got a new Cadillac or another Cadillac. But why would you pay somebody to carry the job out? That doesn't make sense to me. I mean, usually these guys, if they're supposed to kill somebody and they didn't do it, they usually get killed themselves. No matter if it's a mishap or what. But that was a rumor on the Cadillac.
Well, the thing I've always found odd about that is that, of course, Buford said a Cadillac was what was used in the ambush. And it was almost identical to one that W.O. Hathcock had owned.
Right.
And it seems like at the time that he didn't understand or realize that W.O. had sold that car.
Right.
And apparently somebody in Mississippi had it. And they need a car to carry out this alleged ambush. Right. So they steal a Cadillac. Now, of course, so Buford's story is kind of screwed up there. That he's trying to make it point to W.O. Hathcock when W.O. didn't even have a car like that then.
Right. He had something for W.O. I don't know. He really did. I don't know. He did.
W.O. never figured it out. He didn't. Why that Buford hated him so much.
Yeah, he did. I don't know what the deal was. Probably he may have hated him worse than he hated Towhead.
Yeah.
Could have.
Part of it is I've been told that both Larice and W.O., as soon as they heard about the ambush, they went to the TBI and volunteered to take a polygraph test and were escorted back home by them.
Yeah, I've heard that too. Yeah.
So it's kind of like, who volunteers to take a polygraph test to clear themselves, unless, of course, they had nothing to do with it.
Right. That's true. Yeah, that's true. Yeah, his story's blown up. Like I say, Miss Plunk and they have Diane. That story's blown up about Pauline at the house, and Carl calling her, telling her don't let him answer the phone. You
Well, let
know,
me ask you
and
this:
like I
as
say,
long as we're talking about WO,
mhm.
uh, did Rex ever say anything more about WO being involved or whatever?
He never mentioned WO in that to me. He never did. No, I don't think he even believed WO had anything to do with it. You know, I don't even remember mentioning him mention that to me as a rumor. You know,
Yeah. Well,
really.
let's go to another place about this, and that was Rex's connection and opinions of Warren Jones,
Mhm.
investigator.
Warren spoke very highly of Warren. I mean, Rex spoke very highly of Warren Jones and Sloan. What was Sloan's first name? I'm trying to think of it. That
Pardon?
worked with Jones, the Sloan that worked with Warren Jones a lot.
Yes.
The other investigator, yeah. Rex had high praise for Warren Jones. Great investigator, straight shooter, smart guy. And he said that Warren Jones told him many times, said, we got to get Pusser off the street. And he said, man, this guy's involved in all types of stuff. And matter of fact, Warren Jones believed he was selling street drugs. And Warren said we would make reports to the higher ups, reporting, you know, to the TBI. I'm sure his higher ups, and I'm sure it went up to the upper echelons of government. And nothing was ever done. It was like there was, you know, somebody's running interference for him there. And, you know,
Well,
he's just
there
untouchable.
we get into some possible political interference because at the same time, we had the future governor of Tennessee, Ray Blanton,
Yeah.
a U.S. congressman there in D.C.
Right. Yeah.
And of course, Blanton and Buford were from Adamsville, small town,
Right.
900 people back in the day. So, you know that they were in, had a good relationship, especially considering that Buford was rumored to be Blanton's choice, be director of public safety, be in
Right.
charge of the highway patrol and the TBI.
Sure. Yeah.
You know, if he got elected as governor.
Sure. Yeah. You
And
know, yeah, Blanton, I think he was the one, in my opinion. And Rex, I think he kind of believed Blanton was, uh, you know, he, Blanton, I remember Rex saying he was very corrupt. Didn't the Tennessee state legislature have to have a special session to move him from governor because he's offering so many pardons?
well, what they did was, so 3 days before he was going to have another round of pardons before he left office. And so when people found this out, they swore the new governor in using a old law 3 days early so that he would be removed from power 3 days before he would have been, and would not have the ability to sell those pardons and paroles. So at any rate, that took care of that. And, you know, he faced several indictments, but I don't think anything really happened with him.
Yeah. I would say he was probably one pulling strings up there. I would say because, you know, because Warren Jones knew about it and they didn't overlook it. Rex said he was a straight shooter. He didn't, you know, he good investigator, good cop, and they knew he needed something to be done. Pusser, you know, he needed to be off the street and see criminal.
Yeah, and what's so odd is that when Blanton was running for governor, you know, of course, this was about the time that Walking Tall was making it big. So it's one of those situations there where Buford was a Republican, Blanton was a Democrat, but yet he was campaigning for Blanton, the opposing party, which really kind of ruffled some feathers, I guess.
Yeah. You know, Pusser now, whenever the feds would raid, from what I understand, McNairy County, he'd get mad, and sort of state officials, you know, I'm probably the state I'm mad instead of the feds, but when the state would raid McNairy County, he'd get mad. They wouldn't inform him and say that's all political. You know, no, he was elite. He was, you know, like we talked about, you know, how they lured him to Jackson, Tennessee, you know, and everything. But he claimed all this political knowledge because he was informing all of them that they're going to get raided, and they're ready. You know, they were cleaned up. You know, talking about we were talking about those suspects a while ago. Remember when Buford went to Oklahoma with Warren Jones?
Yeah.
And they were walking. Now, Rex wasn't there, but he was told by Warren Jones, he knew those cops there at Oklahoma too. And I think it was either a Tulsa jail, somewhere around Tulsa, Oklahoma City, maybe. Well, Kirchie Nix
went to see Albert McDonald.
Okay, Albert McDonald, yeah. And Kirchie Nix was somewhere else, another prison, Oklahoma, I think, wasn't he?
I think that was possibly Oklahoma City.
Okay. Well, they didn't tell Pusser Nix was in that jail. They didn't tell it. And Nix didn't know Pusser's going to be walking through there. And Rex said they told him they were walking him through there, and him and Nix locked eyes. They just both freeze and look at each other. And said that they asked him, said, was he one of them? Was he? No, he just looks familiar or something like that. Pusser kind of played it off. And Rex said them Oklahoma boys told him that Pusser's, he would pull out, newspaper clippings of how, what newspaper written about him and stuff. And he was in there talking about all these fights and how tough he was. And, he'd shot so-and-so. And they said this cop there on the force was sitting there in the office, and they pointed this guy, he played pro ball, so he's killed 2 or 3 people with bare hands. And Pusser shut up pretty quick then. But Rex said that they told him, like I said, I'll say it again, him and Nix did lock eyes, but he said he couldn't identify him. And McDonald, I think the same thing. He didn't recognize him. Well, that other prison.
That's kind of odd because, and at first Pusser was saying he wouldn't be able to recognize his assailants. Right. Then he was saying he would be able to recognize them. But yet the Arkansas State Police were the ones that provided information about Nix. They sent over photographs of Nix. And he went to the story, well, I'd have to see him in person. And then they take him where you'll see him in person, and he still couldn't identify him.
No, he could not.
And we're talking about the fact that they were sitting in cars beside each other, approximately 5 feet apart.
Right. Yeah.
And yet, short time later, he had no idea that who was who.
Right.
Which brings us up to another thing. Now, all of these guys that were alleged to have possibly had ties, none of them ever formulated into a serious suspect.
No.
None of them ever formulated into a serious suspect.
No, they didn't.
I mean, they had nothing.
No. Who did it point back to? BUFORD PUSSER.
And what is odd is that, tell us about Nimbo Price's connection in all this. First of all, say that Nimbo Price was one of those individuals that wanted to be Towhead White. He was kind of like Towhead's protege.
Sure.
He was trying to learn from Towhead. He wanted to live the lifestyle. I guess he wanted to have the big cars and a pocket full of money, all this. But go ahead and tell us about
Rex said there another rumor was, it got me thinking, you just mentioned Towhead, he wanted to be like Towhead. Rex said that Kirksey Nix and Christian and I believe McGann, and if he said McDaniel was there, McDaniel could have been one. So they spent the night, they were staying at Nimbo Price's house. They weren't staying at the Shamrock anywhere, but that's where they were staying at.
Yeah.
And that might have been a rumor to kind of tie Towhead in with it because they knew Nimbo worshipped him, and Towhead, the man thought, sent word to Nimbo, hey, stay with, he'll let you stay with him or something like that. So that was a rumor. That's where they were staying.
Yeah. And what gets you about that is then we find out McGann, wasn't a likely suspect, and all of these people just fell apart as far as suspects.
Yeah.
You
wonder if Pusser didn't just throw out some of these names he had heard, from Towhead, or because him and Towhead, they did know each other. There's no doubt about it. He may have heard some of the guys, met some of these guys through Towhead. He just throwing names out there, maybe. Makes you wonder.
Of course, we know that Pusser was trained in drama, if you will.
Oh, yeah.
Let's touch on about what happened when Rex and Pusser went to Alabama to do an
investigation. Yeah, they were chasing down some leads over there. Pusser's, believe some people in Alabama had something to do with, like the Dawsons and some of their folks. And first of all, I just want to tell you, Rex he said that Pusser was a chicken crap about the whole thing. So he couldn't get a shot off. He said, that he just thought it was all chicken crap, but if it really happened. But he said there that they were staying in a motel in the same room. He said Pusser wake up in the middle of the night screaming, hollering like he had a bad dream. And said if little you heard a creak in the wall, boy, he'd jump, boy, and get that real nervous, just putting on a good show, he thought, he said, man, but his opinion was it's just chicken crap. He said something else. But,
Yeah, that
yeah.
probably did. That goes back to his training in wrestling, I believe. You just try to make it dramatic as you can. But Rex wasn't the only one to tell that story about not being able to get off a shot.
Right. That's true. Yeah, that's true.
Go ahead and tell us about that.
Well, Barbara talked about that her and Tommy were at a restaurant or something eating, the joint they were known to frequent.
You're talking about Barbara Bivens?
Yeah, Barbara Bivens. Yeah, excuse me. Barbara Bivens, right. And her Tommy Bivens, her husband, yeah. Her ex at that time, they were divorced, I think. But she said, yeah, they were sitting there eating in a restaurant, and Pusser liked Tommy, and he would tell Tommy some things. Matter of fact, he told Tommy one time he shot himself, he grazed himself 3 times, He told Tommy that. And at the time he claimed towhead, he pulled over his car and they shot him 3 times. Well, anyway, he sat down with him. Barbara said she take a good look at his face, look at his scar, cheek, and jaw, and all that. And they're talking about the ambush. And Barbara said she's just getting mad, fixed to say something. Tommy's getting nervous. She knows she's fixed to say something. And Tommy just spoke up and said, Buford, you couldn't get off a shot. He go, you don't believe me? Boy, got mad. Boys, kind of, said some bad words, got up and just stormed out of the restaurant. He was mad. But Tommy asked, you couldn't get off a shot? It ticked him off.
In the previous episode, of course, I covered a lot of that about the Buford story about why he didn't get off a shot, all this.
Right.
It was amazing.
Well, like you pointed out, he wore his holster on the left side. He cross-draw.
Yeah.
So Pauline falls on him. She's not blocking that gun.
No.
She's in Pakistan, falls on. Yeah. She's not blocking it. So that doesn't hold water either. I mean, that just, I don't. But like Rex said, that was a Tennessee investigation, and and seriously, I doubt if Warren Jones and them really wanted to arrest him. I doubt they'd have been allowed to. I seriously doubt it. They probably said that ain't happening. Stuff probably would have got swept under the rug, and probably. And it was.
Well, one thing I would like to point out also is that the TBI is different now than what they used to be, because back then they were Tennessee Bureau of Criminal Identification. They were part of the Highway Patrol, and they were the plainclothes division.
Right.
And there was a lot of politics involved back in those days. Now, back in the 80s, of course, early 80s, the TBI became their own entity. Sure. And this is when they became a closed state. They don't have to share information about their investigations, whatever.
Yeah.
And so it's like now politicians have a really difficult time trying to have any influence over the TBI. And that was the reason why they set it up that way in the first place, I believe, is that the legislature just saw, hey, there's too many people got their hands in these investigations, and we just need to stop that. So that's been a good deal.
It has. You know what, Rex, he pretty much had high praise for the TBI. The investigators, officers, they were good men. Matter of fact, I think he said they had one of the best labs around and rivaled the FBI at the time.
Yeah.
And he really bragged on the organization and all that. Something else too about, I remember in Barbara's book, she's talking about this, Barbara Bivens' book, Tommy and Me. She said just a few weeks before Towhead was killed, or a few months, that they ran into him, and that he was talking about that Buford was trying to blame him for the ambush. And said, you know who did that? Talking to Tommy, I had nothing to do with that. You know who did, blah, blah. And so Tommy's getting real nervous. And when he gets nervous, he starts tugging at his belt, And so Tommy won't talk about it in front of Barbara. But, I think he's kind of hitting, we know who did that, but he's trying to blame it on Towhead, and everybody knew, and like I say, Bill Weiss and law enforcement there that day, didn't he say they all were kind of believe Buford did this and was lying?
It just seemed like the general consensus that day that, everybody was suspicious of the story that Buford was telling, because it didn't make a whole lot of sense.
no. Well, if you think about it, and you've got a guy like Towhead White, Kirksey Nix, guys that need to be off the street, they would do everything they could do to connect him if they could. They would. I mean, they would. I mean, they would stand on their head, and they just couldn't connect them with it, and they would have if they could. But
I'm sure that they
anything
jumped
there.
through hoops trying to make sure they weren't overlooking one of them. You know,
Right.
say they wanted them off the street as bad as Warren Jones wanted Pusser off the street.
Right. They did.
So
but there's connection. They only found
either way you went.
Right. You know, they say, well, you know, some of these old outlaws. Well, I've done a lot of things. So tell you, I didn't do what I went to jail for, but they got me for something. So you know, they couldn't even tie anything together with all these, you know, fellas. Christian, you know, we mentioned him. He was supposedly involved in the gypsy camp robbery, you know, with them, with Towhead and that bunch. But
Right.
you know, so but he was. I know that's the name Rex mentioned. He was always rumored, you know, and Towhead and Kirksey and McGann, but none of them, you know. Well, now I'm gonna say here now, McDaniel, he rounded up Sabine River.
Right.
They tried to claim Pusser off him. Garibaldi, the mobster from Boston, you know, he wound up dead. They say Pusser got to him. Say Pusser got to Towhead White. You know, oh boy, Pusser got around, didn't
he? I do believe, and I'm going to cover this in an episode a lot later. I do believe that Pusser had a lot to do with what happened to Towhead.
Really?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I've
a good episode then. Yeah.
Done a lot of work on that, and there's a lot of things that just that I'm not going to share right now, but we'll make a good episode a little bit later.
Oh yeah. See, Rex had different thoughts on who was involved in Towhead's too. Towhead's death. He had some different thoughts on that.
So
we'll talk about that later. You know,
yeah, we'll cover that then. But at any rate, I just find it odd that you could go through that many suspects and not find a one that you could tie down. You couldn't even tie down the fact that they stayed at Nimbo Price's place that night.
No,
you could. You know,
had any of those fellas even been to Corinth or McNairy County at any time? I wonder. I mean, I know now Barbara said that Kirksey Nix had been to Junior Smith's before. She'd met him, I believe. But now the rest of them, I mean, I don't know. I mean, McDaniel, McGann, they could have been there visited one time. I don't know. I mean, they were friends of Towhead probably, or knew of him.
Well, you know, one other thing I thought we might touch on before we leave this evening is that, you know, Buford, after the ambush, would make all sorts of big claims that there were criminals that came from all over the U.S. To open up shop in McNairy County. And, you know, it's kind of like, why would that be the case? McNairy County, like I explained in an episode, had a total population of around 18,000. Half of those would be adults. The other half would probably be kids. And then you got a large percentage of that 9,000 that are adults that are God-fearing Christian people that didn't go to these places. Right. So let's say, and a lot of people just didn't have the money to go to these clubs, bars, whatever. True. And so you're not talking about a very big population that would frequent these clubs, but yet Pusser was always trying to capitalize on the fact that, oh, everybody wanted in McNairy County. They were coming from all over the United States to be here, and it was, you know.
Yeah. He was the best sheriff money could buy, you know, Mike. I mean, you know, they want to spend the money wisely, you know. Everything. That's what you know, Rex always said about Pusser. I won't forget one of the first things I ever heard in my life. He said Pusser would steal a cook stove and come back a week later and try to steal the smoke.
Well, at any rate, my friend, we're going to get off here for now.
All right, Mike.
And
we enjoyed it.
Enjoyed having you. We'll do this.
Hopefully I didn't embarrass you too bad. Yeah, there you go. But yeah, that's it's interesting, like I say, and you know, but no, it panned out, you know, and at all points, like we take back to Buford, it always trails back to him.
And a lot of people just don't want to understand that.
No, they don't. They really don't. Like I say, these were bad dudes who he threw out there, and if they could have nailed them, they would have.
Yeah,
they would have done it, no doubt.
All right. With that, we're going to wrap it up. So,
all right.
we'll be out here next week with another episode. And we're going to talk about the aftermath on that one, about a lot of things that occurred after the ambush that hasn't really been discussed much. But until then, I hope everyone has a great day.